Hello, Dr. Smith. How are you?
Dr. Barney, I'm doing well.
Okay, excellent. So, thanks for accepting today's invitation. So, today we are going to start within five more minutes. So, I will basically host this particular session. I will introduce you to the speakers, to the participants, and then you can start your.
Great.
So, Rajdeep will Kumarji join virtually? Do you have any information?
Shobochadida, Kumarjudha is already there.
Okay.
His two account section, he's there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Rajdeep, have you checked the live streaming in YouTube? Is it working properly?
Shobochadida, right, it's working properly.
Okay, excellent. So let us wait for a couple of more minutes and then we can start.
Sure.
So, Asdeep, should we start now?
Yeah, Shobhit, we can start. We can start.
Okay, thank you so much. So, good evening to all of you. So, today we are having a special guest with us, and better to say international speaker with us, Dr. Alicia Barnes-Smith. She is a professor from Machine Intelligence Unit, Luleå Technology University, Sweden. And she is also the IEEE Computer Society distinguished visitor. So today she will speak about applying electrical engineering and computer science to the humanities. And it is being organized from IEEE Computer Society Student Branch Chapter IIT Kharagpur and IEEE India Council. I am Sabyasachi Mukhopadhyay, Vice Chair of the IEEE Computer Society Student Branch Chapter IIT Kharagpur section. And with me also the other slate members are present there, like for example Kumarjit Ray, who is the chair of this particular chapter, and Rajdeep Ghosh is the secretary, as well as Anshita Gupta, who is the treasurer of this particular chapter. And let me introduce our speaker now. So basically, like I mentioned, that she is from Luleå University of Technology, and she has an illustrious career over the 22 years from the Department of the Electrical and Computer Engineering. And she also is holding academic background, BS in Computer Science, MS and PhD in Electrical and Computer Systems Engineering. She did all these degrees from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute from the New York City, USA. Her main research interest areas includes image processing and machine learning, which also not limited to the core domain, but also she is interested in exploring the different application areas like document imaging, biomedical image processing, material science, social remediation evaluation, etc. See, for example, in case of the specific document analysis, she also have to work in the areas like modeling, image acquisition, degradations, or analyzing the model-induced defects, or for example, ballot image processing, or for example, the historic document image recognition and analysis. She also is a TEDx speaker. Her talk in TEDx Voice is also available there. Active, she is quite active in terms of the cross-disciplinary and multi-institutional and national and international projects. She has delivered a lot of invited talk nationally and internationally. She is also the co-author of a textbook on machine learning, and she received also a lot of grants, including NSF. And for example, she also received a prestigious award from NSF, like NSF Career Award, NASA. And also, for example, the professional, she also is holding the professional membership, which includes the International Association of the Pattern Recognition. She is the senior member of IEEE and SPI. So there is some general instruction for the participants as well. So please keep yourself muted during the talk. Please wait till the end before asking the questions. You can also, if you have any queries, you can also drop the text as well. And one attendance sheet will be floated from the Rajdeep. So please mark your attendance there. And at the end, what we will do, we will, as per our general practice, we will capture a group photo. So make sure to turn on your cameras if possible then. Okay. So thanks again to Dr. Smith for her kind acceptance of our invitation. So over to you, madam.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here. We'll share my screen, which we should have practiced before, as I don't use Google Meet all the time. There we go. Window, that one. Share. And there we go. Is the screen visible? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
your screen is visible, madam, but the
okay.
presentation is not visible.
Presentation's not visible?
It is showing the presenting the screen, but I think you have not opened up the PPT.
I did, but it.
Kindly open the PPT and then go to the screen sharing mode.
Try this again. And there we go. There we go. That should work.
Yes, madam,
Okay.
it is working. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There. Told you we should have practiced that part ahead of time. Thank you very much for inviting me. This is a topic I love to talk about, and I've talked to many student groups, and I love to talk to student groups. I asked when I first got the invitation whether you read about my talks through the IEEE Computer Society Distinguished Visitor Talk or through the IEEE Students remote speaker, virtual speakers bureau. I'm a speaker for both of them. But I love to share this information with students and professionals because it's something that's not really well thought about. I am originally from the United States. I'm not from New York City. I'm from about 200 kilometers north of New York City, in upstate New York, where, as you said, I got some degrees from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And then I moved out west to Boise, Idaho, and I was a professor there for 23 years. And I've been in Sweden for 2.5 years. I'm up in the northern part of Sweden, and our logo is ice cubes because of us being the northernmost university in the country of Sweden, and Sweden's a pretty northern country. We're quite a ways away from where you guys are located. I did have the pleasure 26 years ago of visiting Karapur, India, when two friends of mine whom I met when I was doing my doctorate got married, and one of whom was from Karapur, and so a lot of the festivities took place there. So it's a wonderful place, and I'm sure it's changed a lot in 26 years, but I'm glad to be speaking with you. So I'll be talking about applying electrical engineering and computer science to the humanities. When we think about electrical engineering, we usually think about topics like electronics and semiconductors, or maybe consumer electronics. Automotive nowadays is a very electrical engineering topic, not as much mechanical anymore, as so much electronics are present in our vehicles. Robotics, again, something which can be mechanical, it could be electrical, it could be computer science. A lot more of it is electrical and computer science than mechanical these days. Biomedical engineering, communications, one of the earliest fields within electrical engineering. Power, which is one of the other early fields in electrical engineering, and the power and communication together is what formed IEEE many years ago. And one of the newer topics is artificial intelligence, which fits in with computer science and computer engineering. It is a very big topic in the IEEE Computer Society. And when people think about AI, nowadays ChatGPT is one of the big things you think about. Maybe ImageNet, some of the biomedical work on identifying tumors and stuff. Autonomous vehicles, voice recognition, face recognition. There's lots of different things. And if you were to search on the web, it can give you several other topics that could be related to AI. But one thing is that none of these things I've talked about, either the AI or the electrical engineering, are the things that I'm working on most with my research these days. So I want you to be aware of the fact that there is more. And a lot of that background comes about because of my earlier work in an area called document analysis. In document analysis is made up of 3 primary areas: image processing, so two-dimensional signal processing; optical character recognition, part of machine learning; and then linguistic modeling, where we look at the language and how the text is organized together. When we're doing the optical character recognition, it all begins by taking some physical object, a book, and then scanning it, which could be on a desktop scanner or it could be on your cell phone. And then we're going to try and combine that information, and we wind up getting a picture of the pages in the book. But the pictures are static. They don't really do a whole lot. Is extremely useful if you're not physically able to visit a place to have a picture of a book. But you can't get a lot of information just from the picture. You need to do some analysis of it. And that analysis is usually the conversion of the image into text, and that's optical character recognition. But we can move beyond optical character recognition into adding information about the styles, what font things are written in, whether something is italics or regular standard font, extracting information about the text, what is a header, what is a page number in the text that's been recognized. So there's a lot more than just reading the text that's important in optical character recognition and in document image analysis. Something people are usually not aware of is that optical character recognition predates computers. This is a picture from a patent from 1929 in the United States, where it was using a pattern recognition where it was looking for a template, and it shined a light through the template to see whether the template matched up any letters that were found in the target document. And then based on the strengths of the signal that was received, would then set a relay to say which number was being recognized. We've come a long way since this over time, and but this is where it all started, long ago. Optical character recognition has seen a lot of growth and changes over the years, and it's applied to a lot of different types of documents with lots of different styles, some business, some newspapers, all sorts of different articles. And a lot of this moved from the fact that when we started getting good at doing something, we always looked for a new challenging problem. It's not just finding the easiest way, it's finding something new and challenging to keep us going. And so as we solve something, we move on to something else. And after machine printed documents, we moved on to handwritten documents, where the letters quite often are touching because they're written in a cursive script. Here's something which is very similar to a cursive script, but it's an old German cursive script in a style that's not used anymore. And I've got a colleague in Germany who's very eager for me to develop a way of automatically recognizing text, because the people cannot read it today, the ordinary people, because it's not used anymore. It hasn't been used since the mid-1940s. And as you'll recognize, there's a lot of scripts that are not English or European scripts, and there's a need to recognize them as well. And so we've gradually migrated into that. Chinese scripts, and there's scripts that are not even regular scripts. This is a cipher script, so it's a totally artificial made-up script. So we try and expand and move on to lots of different things. Along the way, a lot of the documents we're trying to recognize are historical documents, which I personally find very fascinating because they're very, very pretty to look at, in addition to containing a lot of information that most people do not have access to unless they are digitized and the information is recognized and extracted so we can work with it. And the combining of the computer techniques together with the humanities techniques leads us to a field called digital humanities. And that's where a lot of my work has been in the recent years. And I'm going to talk about several projects I work on within the digital humanities. And I'm going to start off with a project called Melville's Marginalia. And this is a project that I work together with Professor Olson Smith, but it's really his project. And I find that these projects are a lot stronger when I am not the one driving it. The technology doesn't drive it, but the goal of the person in the humanities is driving it. What is coming out from there, and how can we assist them in pulling that information? They opened up so many questions we've never thought about. We would never have thought to ask if they hadn't said, well, can you do this? I want to answer this question. And a lot of his study is evolving around who was Melville. Well, he was a 19th century American author, one of the early American authors when the authors stopped trying to be British and started to try and have their own identity. And he's most well known for writing a book about a big white whale, Moby Dick. He was actually born in an area very close to where I grew up and where I went to the university in upstate New York, northern New York. But when he was 12 years old, his father died. And back then, if your father died, your family had no steady source of income. Schools were not public, so you had to have money to pay to go to school. And so he had to stop going to school and spend time working. And at that point, he changed to teaching himself how to do everything. And he read and he read and he read on his own. And then eventually, as an adult, he moved off and went off to sea in order to earn money, which was a way that a lot of young men in the mid 19th century did this. But as he was reading books, he spent a lot of time annotating them, even books that he borrowed from the library or books that he borrowed from friends. And that's all we've got left to learn about what he's doing is the annotations that he's left in a number of different books. As he was writing, his early books were very popular because it was telling stories from him going to sea, and people found these to be fascinating. And as he developed as a writer, his books became a lot more esoteric, and they were not nearly as popular by the general public. And eventually, the publishing companies stopped printing his books. It's not like Amazon or some of the other book dealers today where they print on demand and they have a big warehouse and can store things. And when he died, he was mostly forgotten. So his wife threw out all of his manuscripts and sold most of his personal library collection. But it wasn't until several years later when people started saying, well, you know, he really was quite a genius and wrote a lot of really important works. And I want to know more about him. And so at that point, they had to say, well, who was he? We don't have his manuscripts. We don't know how to study him. And they had to go back and say, well, what was inspiring his writing and how can we get this information? Without his manuscripts, what can we do with his library collection that he no longer owned? Well, they were able to find a lot of the books in secondhand markets and from people who had bought them. Some of the public libraries, like the New York City Public Library, and they have a lot of those books, and they can take the stuff which he hand marked in there and use that, even though his collection was broken up after his death. He owned approximately 1,000 books, we think, based on lists that he had when he died. They did an inventory of his house. And scholars today have been able to identify information about 500 of those books. And the other 500, they're still looking for, hoping that they will show up sometime. And as we're looking at there, people have been trying to research him for about 100 years now. 1920s, a particular biographer started to make a list of those books, and more people added to those lists. And then finally, those lists were published. And at the time, publishing meant that they were retyped and then mailed to people who cared. Eventually, instead of mailing them, the internet came along, and people said, oh, well, we can just make that list on the internet. We don't need to mail it anymore. And then eventually Melville's Marginalia came to be, where we were able to publish stuff online. And they added to that not just a list of the names of the books, but actually a full brown website where actually scans of pages of the books are there. And so we can go through, see a list, we can browse as if we were in a library, where we can see the different books. We can click on a particular book, and in that book, we get the information about the different chapters. And we can see the different pages and the information about which ones were marked and which ones were not. And I got brought into this project because they wanted some help with doing optical character recognition on the text in this. And I specialize in optical character recognition. Okay, I can do this. And I didn't really use a package which I developed. I used something else that some other group developed in a European Union grant. But it did the job, but not perfectly. So there's some extra work to be done, which I was largely involved with. A lot of these pages he did mark up, but he then erased them. So we have to do some image processing in order to find those marks. Because things he was marking up are obviously things which he felt were more special about the stuff as he was reading. Now, we're not entirely sure why he was erasing things. Some people think it was so that the books could be sold at a higher price. Nobody wants to buy a marked up book. Or maybe the family was a little bit embarrassed by some of the things that he marked up. We don't know. But there's, in addition to marks, there's also text of information and notes that he made to himself. And so we know where they are, and we're marking where they are relative to what text was there. And then we can do analysis about what text was most marked up. So as I do the scanning of there, it was really much more editing to label the marginalia. And we did a lot of work with word frequency analysis, which words occurring how frequent. And we're interested in writer style analysis. Where did he get these ideas? And what text did he read that was influencing him? The XML is just a pretty standard XML, taking all the different words that are in the text and marking where they're located on a page. Nothing really fancy there. The labeling of the marginalia is done pretty manually because we want to make sure it's done perfectly. And that's where we're 100% sure that the optical character recognition was done correctly. And we also mark in the text that he hand wrote in the book. And this, sometimes we cannot read all of it. And this definitely is not up to being automatically done. The state of the art really is still not there for handwritten work. So we go back to the questions that we've got from the people studying humanities. What did he read? Well, we know the names of the books, but what was he reading and focusing on as he read them? What did he comment to himself? What were the things which he was thinking about as he was reading? Did he write little notes? And then the bigger questions is, how did that affect his writing? Well, some of this we can get out of word frequency, word clouds. Some of this where you can look at which words was he marking up in different books, in different sections of different books. Well, something was happening here in Hamlet that really caught his attention. And then we can also see other things and be drawn to pages where he was marking things up. And so here's an example where we can see he definitely marked it up. There's 4 check marks there. And we can look at some of the text that he was marking up. Okay, talking about sharks. And the scholars, as they were reading through these things, said, sharks may be seen looking at the ship. And here's a part of one of the books, Moby Dick, where he's also talking about the sharks and the sharks seen looking at the ship's decks. So this was a pair of texts that were manually paired together by one of the scholars on Herman Melville because they found some similar text. We've also found some other places which scholars have found which has some text which we find very, very unusual. The word gurgling is not a common English word, but it appears both in a book, a reference book about whales, and in his classic book about the whale Moby Dick. Okay, gurgling, that's probably not coincidence. And on that page where the word gurgle appeared, there's also some erased notes. And we can't see all of those notes, but we got some of those words we can pick out. And if we do a little bit of guesswork, we can guess that maybe he took those notes initially and in the editing process replaced some of these other words with some other related words, including possibly that word gurgling, more rearranging and adding words. And then if we do this combination of edits, we wind up with some text from Moby Dick. Now, we're not sure this is how he came up with these ideas, but it's a possibility. And certainly a lot more because we don't have his original drafts of Moby Dick. So maybe this influenced, maybe this helped him build these famous lines. Now remember, he owned about 1,000 books, and so if we're going to try and find all these pairs, that takes an awful lot of manual effort. So that's where computers can come in. And if we're going to look at all those books, we'd have to compare it with every book that he read or that he wrote. And that's a lot of work. And then if we figure out the fact that there's lots of different books that he read, this is a very, very big job for humans to go through and compare everything in a book that he read, cross everything in a book that he wrote. So let's bring in the computers. Well, here's something which one of the scholars has found where the words have some similarities. Plurality of husbands appears in both. Well, I've got a doctoral student and she's looking at BERT similarity, one of the scores comparing different words. And we can see that those words indeed do have a very high BERT similarity score. Okay, so maybe we can apply this technique to some other passages and some other words will pop up. But notice that there's also some words with scores in the high 0.5 and low 0.6s that also appear. So we got to figure out how do we pick out the ones that really are there and how do we not pick out the ones that do not fit in there. Another case of a pair of readings and writings that scholars have found, again from that reference book on whales and the book he wrote about whales, Moby Dick, that there's a lot of words that have to do with royalty in both. And they're talking about specifically the Greenland whale. Okay, so maybe again, not coincidence. So one of my postdocs was saying, well, let's see if we can ask a large language model, do you find anything in this where this passage here might appear in something with Moby Dick? And your ChatGPT or equivalent will always give you an answer and a reason. And so here is one response, but that's not what the experts said was the good pairing. Okay, well, here's another response that the LLM came up with. Nope, that doesn't match either. And here's another one, and this one actually matches. Okay, so LLMs are capable of finding the pairs, but notice there was also 2 false alarms. So you have too many false alarms, and the scholars are going to be spending much more time chasing down false alarms than they're going to be chasing down actual matches. So there's still a lot of work to be done because LLMs are way too full of hallucinations and false alarms. But that's an area of research which we can contribute to as technology scholars. So we're going to continue on with research on trying to figure out what was influencing him and how, and there's lots of things that can be done. Now, not all of his books are available to us today. Some of them have appeared and then disappeared again. But there was a scholar at Harvard University in Boston, Massachusetts in the 1960s who did a dissertation on Herman Melville, and he took all of the passages that were marked up in the books that they had available to them in 1960, and he typed all of them up in his doctoral thesis. And if it was italics, he underlined them, and he did some other things to mark bold, and he duplicated all the marginalia for these passages. And we have this. There's 11 volumes, several thousand pages worth of writing in this guy's doctoral dissertation, where a lot of it is just devoted to taking passages from the books and retyping them and remarking them up by hand. And we now want to take this over 1,000 pages of doctoral thesis, and we want to do OCR on these. Well, if it has all the marginalia, the OCR packages do a very poor job of identifying what is a paragraph and what is a picture. And so you can see on the third line, and compels us, etc., that the underlining the OCR thought was text when it's really not. And it missed the second line, difficulty obliges us. So all those marginalia that are duplicated in this dissertation did not help us to recognize the text. But if I remove all those marginalia by doing image processing, then the OCR does a fine job of recognizing the different paragraphs, even if it says there's 2 paragraphs when there's really 1. And if I've removed them, that means I know where they're located, and I can then put them back in and go back into those labeled XML files indicating where are their marginalia. As I'm doing the OCR on these, it's a fixed width font, so we can divide it into even little segments and mark out where each of the different letters are. But if the OCR accidentally does not give us the right bounding boxes for the words, dividing things into those individual letters does not work anymore. So we need to try and do some correction on this. So I can pull out all of the letters by different class and say, okay, what does an average letter look like, just averaging them together? And it does a pretty good job because they all look the same. And I can then pull out which letters do not match the ones in our template. And with that, we can say, okay, these might be errors. Maybe we need to go back and either fix the OCR or at least fix the segmentation of the line. So there's lots of ways where I'm involved with this project. I've been working on this for over 10 years, and it's still ongoing work. And I'll be actually presenting at a conference of Melville scholars in June in Connecticut, USA, showing them some of the work I have done and telling them some of the things about what's possible using technology. Another project that I've worked on is with some colleagues in France on old typography. Gutenberg invented the printing press in the mid-1400s, or at least a version of it, and the reusable type. And as people came up with a different type, it's really an art form to come up with those different letters. Earlier, they were handwritten by scribes, and there were different styles of scribes used. And the earlier typographers worked really hard to try and duplicate that, but then eventually they used their own artistic efforts to design the type themselves. So old printing is that physical printing press where it's got pieces of type which are pressed down into the paper and produces our books. Today, we've only got the pages of the books left because a lot of the old type was melted down years and years ago, where it wore out or it was just simply lost as small pieces. We want to take this and apply what I call image processing magic to be able to virtually reconstruct those pieces of lead type. And more than the lead type, we want to be able to draw what the shapes of those letters are, such as what you have available in any of the word processing packages that you use. And with that, we can recreate text and we can do better analysis of the text. It allows us to create new documents that look like old ones, and we can analyze things. So one particular book I've worked on from early printing, printed in France, and this is just available in the French National Library. It was not scanned at very high resolution, around 3 dpi. It has a lot of degradations to it from bad printing, and you can see extra pieces of noise inside that A, and the fact that the M is broken. So definitely not perfect and not scanned perfectly. Using a simple character segmentation approach, which is just applying a global threshold and then segmenting into connected components, we can get the individual letters. And we can take and select all of those individual letters that are of one particular category. So here's all the D's from this one page, and we can then combine all of these D's in a similar approach to what I showed you for Melville. And actually, I'm using code from this project in the Melville project. So this project is an older project that I worked on before the Melville one. And with those, we can bring them all together, align them, and we can come up with an average, and from there, a template for what the ideal letter looks like. But one thing along the way that we discovered is that the D's are not all the same. If we look at the serifs down below, we can see that they have different shapes. And this is not just from degradations during printing, from the fact that some of the ink has worn off or maybe the page didn't get fully inked. These are definitely different designs. So while these all appeared on the same page, the print house had stuff coming from different font boxes, actually. And we see the same thing happening in the serifs in the top. So there's quite a lot more variety than we thought existed along the printing. It's not like today if you print something in Times New Roman where everything is pretty identical. They had a lot of variety we didn't know about. So we think that they really were just replacing things little by little, and they didn't always buy complete sets of letters. Something else that we're looking to do with these analysis is to take these old documents, and again, this was printed in the late 1400s, and at that time, the way that they wrote and the way that they spoke French were very different than modern day. We can do OCR on it, and it will tell us what letters are there. But some of those letters are not using a type convention that we use today. In the top left, you see the long S, which was used in Europe quite a bit if the S did not appear at the end of the word or the start of the end of the word. Likewise, U's and V's, they've always changed around whether it would be a U or a V based on whether it was at the beginning or the middle of the word. And that's not what people are used to seeing today. So we can do some updating and changing things to modern typing conventions by replacing things by what people would expect to see today. And then we can take this old French and we can modernize it to modern French, the stuff that's taught in the schools today, the stuff that's spoken on the streets in France today. And while we're updating it to modern French, we could also translate it to English, which, for instance, would make it a lot easier for most of you on the call to be able to read this passage. But this does not look like something written in the middle of the 1400s. But if I were to use those templates of what those letters looked like in the old printing, I can virtually print it, make a diplomatic reconstruction that looks like the books from the middle of the 1400s, but is in modern English, making it accessible to everybody. So you get the feeling of reading an old book while still being able to read something which you can use. Third project I want to talk to you about today is one called Historia Scholastica, which I'm working with a history professor at my old university in Idaho. This book was written in the early 1100s. Now, back then, we did not have the printing press. Everything was hand printed by scribes. And we also did not have paper that had yet to come from China. So it was printed on parchment, and parchment came from the skins of animals. And so therefore, it was very expensive to get because you needed to own animals, and not everybody owned animals. And so most stuff that was written in that time had something to do with the Bible. And this is another case of that, where it was the Bible, and it was trying to educate children of wealthy people about the Bible and the Bible stories without them reading the entire Bible. And so what we want to do in this project is to transcribe the text, translate it to English, determine who was the printer, which we pretty much have succeeded in already, and compare the text across the different editions. We also want to see how, if we go across the different editions, what material stayed in the beginning and what was different as we came to the more modern editions, as every scribe, every time it was rewritten, made some different changes based not just on the scribe's opinions, but on the people who owned and commissioned the copying of the book. This book was one of the most common books used in medieval Europe in the universities in the Middle Ages too. And as this book is the oldest book physically in existence in the state of Idaho, We'd like to make a virtual display where we can share it better with a wider audience by including annotations as well as the digital copies. Here's an example of what this book looks like. It does not have any gold leaf in it and all those fancy pictures, but it does have illuminated capitals at the beginning of every chapter. It has drop caps at the beginning of every section. The sections are rubricated with some notations saying here's a new section. Capital letters at the time were indicated by marking them with red. Red is where the word rubricated comes from. So that's how we can tell whether it's a capital letter. And they also contain an awful lot of touching characters and ligatures. Now remember, these things were printed on parchment, and parchment was expensive, so they used a lot of putting things very tightly close together so you could print as much as possible. And even once they became printed by a printing press, they kept a lot of the old printing and scribal conventions and ways of writing them. And that includes using abbreviations, so we did not need to write out all the long words, particularly if these things were being written and copied by hand by human scribes. So here on the left, you can see some of the scribal abbreviations where long phrases would be abbreviated as a shorter symbol. And on the right, you can see where pairs of letters and sets of letters would be abbreviated. The bar above the A, the E, could be an N or an M rather than writing that long character next to it. And so you need to figure out where are these different marks and how do we expand them. Some of the work that's involved is separating the colors, where is red, where is blue, where is green, black, and background page. Segmenting into different columns so we know what the reading order is. Separating it into the individual lines, so we have the individual letters we're looking at. And because some of the initial captures of these books have been done with a camera, a handheld camera, it's not always directly above it. So there is some perspective distortion. And there are image processing techniques which can fix that and turn things into a lot more of a rectangular shape instead of having a trapezoidal shape, which you see from perspective distortion. Working on doing the recognition, I'm using a technique which does not care about touching characters, called character spotting, which one of my former PhD students developed for his doctoral dissertation, which is based on object spotting. And today that would be something as a YOLO detector, which is what I'm using, although he used another detector that was preceded YOLO because his work preceded YOLO. And you can see that a lot of the letters we can indeed accurately find, even if they're touching something else, but it's not 100% correct. So we still have some work to do on this. And there it's a matter of time is really short. I've got a lot more projects and ideas than I have actual time to code myself. And having a big research team here, I spend a lot of time administratively supervising and helping them with their research. We hope eventually to make a nice display where we can display all the stuff on the pages of these books together with narrative and other related information. So it's a really cool project. It's one of my newer projects and it's a lot of fun to work on. But there's lots of places to do interdisciplinary work, and I've got several other projects I'm not going to give you a lot of information on. Just want to give you some ideas of some of the other places. One of my postdocs, Chang, is working together with some researchers in Germany at the Center for Study of Manuscript Cultures. And they've got a lot of historical books with images, and they really want to extract information from those images. And so things that he's looking at is, can we, as a human, query and say, find images that have 3 people in them? And can we extract all the images, summarize them, form a database, and use that query together with a search engine to then return the images from different books that have 3 people in them? Bible Morales is another case of one of these old books from medieval Europe that has a lot to do with the Bible, teaching people about the Bible. And here we've got text as well as images, and the text describes the image. We want to do OCR on that text and then translate it to English. And from the images, we want to extract the different characters that are in those images, the different people. And based on the text, come up with some pose sequences and use that to animate the characters. Now, this is not related to the specific text there, it's just a particular arbitrary sequence, but you see that we are capable of animating it. And it's fun to look at and makes great stuff for presentations. We're using that same information to look at the same techniques to look at satellite images or images taken by drones of cars driving in the wintertime, or we're using it for some work on some Swedish Olympic skiers, trying to extract their movements and help them to give feedback to the skiers to improve their skiing and help Sweden to do better in competitive racing. Another one of my former PhD students did some work on biofuels, where we're looking at, instead of growing crops for producing ethanol and fuel, can we take scrap, stuff that's left over in the field at the end, bale this, and then make fuel out of this? But those are going to contain a lot of different substances, and can we separate it out and say how much is actual cob, how much of it is the stalk, how much of it is leaves? And we really want to be able to identify if there's rocks and dirt, so we know how much to pay for it and whether any of it's going to damage our processing machines. We're using this together, some of the same techniques, and he's been very kind in his job that he has now to be able to take a computed tomography, CT machine, and scan a piece of paper fibers. We want to analyze paper fiber to see how the different processing techniques compare. And so here's an example of a small piece of rolled up paper, which he was able to scan for us. And with that, we can see those fibers and we can trace and see what their orientations are and do analysis. And this is helping scholars who are looking at the different techniques used to make paper. And if they know the way the fibers will appear for different techniques, we can look at an unknown piece of paper and therefore know what the technique was, and therefore know the date and the location where that technique was used. And so where did that book come from based on the paper? So I find doing research with the digital humanities to be absolutely fascinating. The projects are really interesting and very, very diverse. I've worked on several projects and I've got several sitting in my queue waiting for my attention. And I find it's a nice way to apply artificial intelligence, engineering, and computer science to help my colleagues in the humanities solving their problems. And there's a lot of techniques can be applied both to their work and to other technology work, such as our skiers and our Nordic driving. So how can AI help research in the humanities? Well, we can take that, the technology, we can take the humanities, and as we combine it, we can wind up with a happier world, because knowledge is really good to have. It really enriches our lives if we can also study the humanities. And if you want to know more about some of my projects, you can watch my TED Talk, which is available if you just Google my name and TED, or even if you Google digital humanities and TED, it'll come up and you can see some of the same projects and some other projects I've worked on, as I talked about it there. And I want to let you know there's opportunities for collaborative student projects. Just reach out to me if you've got time and are looking for a project to work on. My postdocs have lots of things where students can get involved and we can further some of these projects along. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk with you today. I'm open to stay around and answer questions, and I hope you found this interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for your wonderful talk. So, is there anyone from the audiences who has any queries? Please kindly kindly ask your query to the madam. You can post your query in the comment box section, or you can unmute yourself and directly ask to Dr. Smith. Well, Dr. Smith, I personally have a query. I have already jotted down in the comment box section, and I am reading it out for you. And I am also requesting, if possible, kindly check my query to the comment box section. So, how do you envision the intersection of electrical engineering and computer science with the humanities influencing the development of new educational methodologies or tools for students in the humanities field?
Well, like I showed you some examples of some of the projects that I've worked on. And because of the work that I'm doing with the Melville project, there are many undergraduate students working on that who've been making use of the information I'm able to provide by extracting the marginalia related to where it is in the words. And one of them has gone on to graduate school to work on a master's degree. And he then has done some extra work learning the programming language R, which does a lot of text analysis. And he took a module that he learned about because I influenced him to reach out and learn that the stuff was there. And he found one on sentiment analysis. And so he has written something that can chart the sentiment in books across by page by page by page or chapter by chapter. And he's got some analysis of that he's put together, and that's forming the core of his master's thesis. And he's doing it not just for Herman Melville, but for other authors. And with that, he's taking these sentiments and using that. And the stuff that he's written has now been put into that Melville website online. And so it's available for anybody can reach out and access that website. And all of you can look at that. It's not password protected. It's open to everybody if you want to explore what he's written and what the marginalia is, including using the tool to talk about the word frequency and the annotations about the styles.
Thank you very much, madam, for your elaborate answer. So, is there anyone who wants to ask any question to the madam? Okay, so if there is no query, let us thanks to madam. Let us be thankful to madam for sharing her precious time with all of us and share her journey in the engineering field with us. So let me present the memento to her. So I hope Dr. Smith will like this digital memento. So we shall email this particular memento you, madam.
Great, I've got a little collection of them. And I'll be happy to add this to my collection.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think it's a time for group photo. So I request all the members who have joined kindly turn on your cameras so that we can take the group photo. And I am requesting Rajdeep to please take the group photo.
Sure, Shubhajyota. Sure.
So let us wait for a few seconds. I think there are people who are turning on their cameras. So I repeat, it's a time for the group photo. So I'm requesting all the respected members to kindly turn on their cameras.
Good to see you all. Thank you for coming.
So Rajdeep, kindly go ahead.
Yeah, Shubhajyota. Done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Dr. Smith. Thanks to all the participants who have joined to make this event a grand success. And thanks to all the organizing team members.
Have a good evening. It's Friday evening for you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So we are closing the event for today. We shall come back to you again with the next event on an interesting topic. We will get our announcement very soon. So till then, see you. Goodbye. Have a great day.